Hello folks, I hope it's all going groovy for you. As you know, if you've been following this channel, I step around locations made famous by music artists and provide information about the related musician. The purpose of each walk is so viewers from all around the world can see what those places look like in up-close detail. So, welcome to this Musical Steps third of 3 movies, predominantly focused on John Lennon's early life, prior to becoming successful with the Beatles. I don't know if you spotted it in previous Musical Steps episodes, but as I always do with these movies, I utilise relevant lyrics and song titles embedded as part of my narration. Let me know how many you spot in the comments section, and indeed what song titles and lyrics that you would have added to the narration. Anyway, in this final part of the trilogy, we'll look at some of the factors that contributed to both John Lennon and Paul McCartney's personalities. Over the last 6 decades or so, a lot has been negatively said about John Lennon's spiky and occasionally aggressive personality. But I feel what is often overlooked by some people is the emotional damage inadvertently inflicted on him as a child that caused him to react the way he did to some of those around him. That said, in later life, John increasingly recognised his most negative personality flaws and worked hard on subduing them. So, today, as you can see, I'm in the rain at St. Peter's Church in Walton, a place long thought to be the location of John Lennon's first meeting with Paul McCartney. Speaking of rain, there's an old song called Into Each Life Some Rain Must Fall. It was recorded in 1944 by Ella Fitzgerald, duetting with the Ink Spots, as the Second World War was slowly drawing to a close, around 3 years after John Lennon and Paul McCartney were born in the bombed city port of Liverpool. The lyrics of Into Each Life Some Rain Must Fall assert everyone will experience difficulty and heartache at some point, and as a result, any subsequent joy experienced can be appreciated all the more as a contrast to the pain endured. In other words, the metaphoric rain that falls in a person's life will inevitably recede at some point, and the sun will shine once again, with all problems washed away. It's a nice lyric and it's a nice sentiment, and it probably holds true for most people. However, I think it largely depends on the severity of the metaphoric rain, and, with that proviso, it cannot be held to be true for everyone. Children from broken homes, as they were once called, do tend to find it very difficult to overcome the pain. It lasts a lifetime. The pain and shame never stop. It's that sort of home that John Lennon lived in as a child. Now, as you can see on this late October Friday afternoon, the statement, Into each life some rain must fall, is somewhat apt, because there is a fair amount of very heavy and prolonged showers. Though looking around, I can see blue sky too. That means I'll be able to exclaim here comes the sun at appropriate moments. Anyway, I'm here stepping around this St. Peter's Church location that has long been accepted to be the place where John met Paul for the first time. Though new evidence suggests it's not actually accurate that this was the first place that they met. If you want to see where Lennon actually first met McCartney, watch my previous Musical Steps movie to discover the real location. To validate the claim made in that earlier episode, U2 singer Bono says McCartney once told him the same thing. In his autobiography called Surrender, Bono said he was once travelling by car around Liverpool, with McCartney driving him on a magical mystery tour of significant Beatles locations. Bono describes the journey with McCartney going here, there and everywhere around Liverpool as being like Moses giving him a tour of the Holy Land. According to Bono, they drove past a newsagent shop a couple of miles away from St. Peter's Church here in Walton, the place always said to be the place Lennon first met McCartney. And Paul told Bono the newsagent shop was the real location for his first meeting with John. Bono relates how McCartney told him he shared a chocolate bar with Lennon outside the newsagent shop, a little while before the accepted musical folklore version of their first meeting at St. Peter's Church Hall. Adopting the voice of McCartney, Bono says, "See over there, that newsagent. It's changed a bit, but that's where I had my first real conversation with John. John came out of the newsagent where he'd bought a bar of chocolate. He broke it in half and gave me one half. I was amazed because back then, chocolate was really something. Most boys would break off a little square, but John gave me half his bar. In his autobiography, in his mind, Bono points out that the equal sharing of the chocolate bar indicates how John and Paul later equally shared songwriting royalties, despite who actually wrote the song. Anyway, you'll see that newsagent location in the second movie from this trilogy, looking at Lennon and McCartney. Anyway, here, while sheltering from the rain, I'm going to talk about how intense metaphoric rain fell onto the lives of McCartney and Lennon when they both lost their mothers at an early age. Despite the individual pain the metaphoric rain caused them, it brought together two ostensibly different people and formed a bond between them that perhaps would not have been as strong or even existed at all if they hadn't shared independent painful circumstances. In McCartney's Lament to Lennon, Here Today, from his album Tug of War, released 2 years after John had been murdered in 1980, Paul sings about the time he and John cried together, thinking about their lost mothers. Paul laments, "What about the night we cried, because there wasn't any reason left to keep it all inside." It's important to remember there was a 20-month age difference between John and Paul. Now, I mention this because schoolboys tend to make lifelong friends with people similar to themselves, and more often than not, with peers of the same age. Even a 1-year age difference is a big gap when around 16 years old. And so, as I say, schoolboys tend to stick to the same year group for friends. That's not to say that different ages and dissimilar backgrounds don't ever come together to form friendships, but it's a lucky break when those factors do collide to form friendships. So, despite the 20-month age difference between Lennon and McCartney, it was the shared painful loss of their mothers that brought John and Paul closer together. So much so they regarded themselves as the two of us. Obviously nobody present knew on that hot July the 6th Saturday afternoon in 1957, when two slightly different age schoolboys from slightly different social backgrounds officially met up. Nobody present that day knew John and Paul would not only form the biggest band in the world, but also come together to form an intensely close friendship that would, as is often the case, have more ups and downs than the helter-skelter, and more hellos and goodbyes than Dr. Robert's surgery. It seems the stars aligned that day and gave the world the greatest pop songwriting partnership ever. But imagine that Saturday hadn't been a gloriously warm summer's day, and instead, like it is today, it had been raining all those years ago. If it had been raining, would Paul have ridden his bike over to the village fete if it meant he got soaked to the skin? Would the ever fashion-conscious McCartney have risked turning up soaked and not looking cool? Remember, he wore his best cool clothes that Saturday in 1957, as a way of impressing on those he met he wasn't just another young boy. Arguably, if Paul had chosen not to attend the village fete, the course of popular music would not have taken the long and winding road that it did. If Paul had chosen not to attend the fete, July the 6th, 1957 would have been just another day in Walton and totally forgotten about. It's unlikely the Lennon and McCartney friendship would have begun.